Great to meet everybody. We basically come together and have a conversation around DDoS and essentially why it's still a thing. Many companies, in fact, most enterprises need to have many different cyber protections in place, and DDoS is certainly going to be on that list. What I want to do here is kick off a discussion around this topic. Let's get started. Alon, let me pass the ball over to you.
Thank you, Howard. I'm very happy to be here. I must say I'm a big fan of DrZeroTrust podcast. Big honor to have you with us here, Chase.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I think DDoS is something people still are not dealing with, and it should be. The numbers, like when you deal with the fallout from a DOS, are what impresses me.
Yeah. So that's very important that you're joining us to help educate basically the world about the danger of successful DDoS attack. Big respect. We still see DDoS is a big pain, right? Causing damage in downtime to companies and organizations worldwide. And there are multiple attacking groups out there that are basically causing a lot of pain in the world to governments, to banks, to financial sector. And we talk about the next level of attacks, like now DDoS attacks are measured in terabytes, right? Or millions of requests per second. Last year, Google mitigated a DDoS attack of 400 million requests per second on their services. That's a new level that we reached, which was not something that we saw in the past. I'm going to share now a few slides about that topic. Can everyone see my slides?
Yeah, we can see you.
We do see the common for all these companies. They were hit by DDoS attack publicly. They admitted that lately, and they suffered from damaging downtime. You probably ask yourself, well, those are big companies, right? Probably they have the most sophisticated or best DDoS protection technology in the market. So why are they still go down? Why are they still suffering from DDoS? And the main reason is the problem is not with the technology. The technology of DDoS protection is good, but with how you use it and how you configure that to adjust your needs. You can see here good examples from, I don't know, SAS Airlines that were hit by Anonymous Sudan and got a ransomware request for $3 million. And other companies, Europe, USA, doesn't matter. They're doing whatever they want and they're getting money from that. Let's just define what is attack. When we talk about DDoS attack, basically we have a service, we have an online service, and then we have this legitimate user wants to get to this service, and suddenly some attackers comes in and disrupt it, makes it unavailable by flooding it with a lot of requests. We get two types of DDoS attack. The volumetric type, its purpose is to overwhelm the bandwidth or the internet connectivity line of that service. And we have applicative or more, let's say, a resource type of attack. Its purpose is not to overwhelm the bandwidth of that service, but to overwhelm its resources, its CPU, its RAM. You get like HTTPS flood and stuff like that. Any insights from your side, Chase, about DDoS attacks in general?
Yeah, this is the problem with DDoS attacks. This is such a commoditized avenue of exploitation for organizations. If anybody remembers, a while back, they had this thing called low orbit ion cannon. And then they came up with a thing called high orbit ion cannon. But anybody anywhere could download that stuff, configure it, and then you pretty much were able to target whatever you wanted. It would generate enough traffic, you could take down all kinds of websites. This type of thing, all of us have experienced DDoS. Like I have a daughter who's a big Taylor Swift fan. She experienced DDoS when Taylor Swift stuff went down because everybody tried to get to Taylor Swift to buy tickets. Now, that was a good example, in my opinion, of the applications not being ready for the flood of traffic. If you can bring down Taylor Swift with people literally trying to buy tickets to go to her concerts, think about how bad this can get on the far side when it is malicious attackers that are trying to do this stuff. I think too, what stands out to me when I think about DDoS is looking at the slides you had before. If you look at what went on there, a lot of times those organizations and businesses, they're having to pay out to get people back to where they were. Service goes down. We all talk about 5 nines uptime and how you're supposed to be available no matter what, everywhere in the world all day long. If you're a bank and you have 10 minutes of downtime because of a DOS, that is exponential numbers of dollar value. There's a follow-on to that. This is a problem, to your point, that shouldn't be the problem that it is today. But most people have this misconception that it's the fiber channels problem or it's Comcast issue. Not really. They provide you access. They are not worried about whether or not you get DOS. They're moving traffic. Whether or not your traffic is legitimate is a different story.
Yeah, I remember that you talked about the Taylor Swift attack. I remember, I think a few years ago, I've been to the States in New York in the subway, and suddenly I lost reception. It wasn't actually reception. I lost the ability to send data, text messages, or go to the social networks. I thought maybe that's a specific area in the subway. I cannot get reception. That's fine. I'll wait. I went out to the subway, went to, I think it was a Starbucks or something like that have a free Wi-Fi. I just joined to the Wi-Fi. And then I go to Twitter and I saw, okay, a major ISP, right, bandwidth.com in Canada went down and affected the entire East Coast. A lot of other ISPs were affected because of that. And there was a major VoIP attacks by a group, I think their name was Rival. And they were able to bring down many companies such as VoIP MS and bandwidth.com. Bandwidth.com had to deal with this type of attack for more than a week from a DDoS attack and publicly admitted that $12 million loss by reputation, by customers leaving unfinished project, and obviously expense of problematic equipment and the need to pay for IT service. I remember that you and I, Chase, were talking about the cost of IT services downtime, right? How much does it cost? Well, I saw a report of Gartner talking about around $5,600 per minute. That can sum up to hundreds of thousands of dollars per hour, right? Did you cross any information like that?
Yeah, so I actually was doing some research for this webinar, and the number that stuck out to me was from a research publication. On average, if you get hit with a DOS and you're an organization that has, I believe it was considered mid-size enterprise or larger, it's about $40,000 an hour. And if you sit there thinking about $40,000 an hour, and the other side of that, and I think we have the slides in here at the end from the research too, an average for a system to go down is anywhere from 6 to 8 hours. So take 40,000, multiply it by 6, and that's the average. That's the baseline. So this can get even really worse, or excuse me, this can get really bad really quick. The other one that stands out to me too is I'm a big cyber warfare research person. If you look at what happened with Estonia and what's going on in Ukraine and even in Israel as well with some of the stuff from Hezbollah and Hamas, whatever, this is a common tactic for organizations to launch prior to additional exploitation. Because if your services aren't working, I can do all kinds of other things. And one thing to think about on the far side of a DDoS, let's say you recover, a lot of systems come back in a default state. And when they come back in a default state, that's a bad place to be, because now the person that DOSed you is trying to log in with default usernames and passwords and creds. That is exactly what happened in Estonia. That's what happened in Ukraine with some of the critical infrastructure. So there's really broad implications here. And it's not often you see an exploit sort of side of things that can tie into financial loss, brand impact, and potentially national level security concerns.
Yeah, that's a huge pain. I'd like us to talk a bit about regulatory and legal considerations, Chase. We talked about the problem itself. How is that affecting new compliances, regulations, rules such as the SEC, DORA? I'd be happy to share my point of view, but first of all,
yeah, there's new regulations coming in now. The US, of course, we have the SEC stuff. You've got your 8K filings and whatever. Most organizations, I would argue, have not really looked too far down the rabbit hole on actually the line for line compliance requirements around DOS or DDoS, because they're usually like, it's handled, it's taken care of, our upstream provider will do that. It didn't work well for everybody else, it's not going to work well for you. You're not compliant if you can't deal with that type of attack. And they literally say in some of these compliance documents how much traffic you have to be able to take to stand up to. If you're a small business or a mid-size or whatever, and you can't, you're legally, or excuse me, illegally doing business. And I don't think anyone wants to be a CIO or CEO that when the investigation happens, because it will by law now, they're going to start asking those questions. And if you're sitting there saying, well, we were trading, we were doing business, but wait a minute, you guys submitted paperwork that said that you were compliant with this. And did you realize that you have to be able to take this level of traffic? Sure, we pencil whipped it. Guess what? You were doing things illegally. And the days of us on the business side being able to say, well, I didn't know, those are going away. You're going to have to be able to respond to this. And it is getting a lot of push, a lot of going forward. Matter of fact, I was on a working group. We just submitted language up to the White House on the definition of negligence in the context of cyber. This would fall into the definition of negligence. So your board, your CEO, your CIO, those people, they are going to have to be able to understand, respond, and talk about how they would deal with this type of attack. You can't hide behind, I don't know anymore.
Right. So if I understand correctly, at some point, that gives the CISOs a bit more power, right? Because until now, CISOs were depend on budgets. But now, those regulatory comes to the ones who determine the budgets and tell them, you are responsible. And sometimes people actually can go to jail. I was surprised to see that in the DORA and also in the SEC. That's something new to me, that if your organization is not strong enough to stay up and keep your availability online, you will face some fines. In some cases, you even can go to jail.
Well, and if you're critical infrastructure, it's even more important. I think there was a report that came out this week about water systems in the US. Critical infrastructure, they've been tagged as critical infrastructure. The laws are getting really, really impactful around that.
Yeah, we're talking about critical infrastructures, but there are solutions, right? So it's not that this is a problem that cannot go away. You just need to use the solutions correctly. So what I'm going to do now, let's go very quickly on the types of DDoS protections technologies out there right now that we can use. And then I'll share some slides about what is the definition of the problem and how to solve it. And we can go on and continue to best practices suggestions. Let's say I have an organization I want to protect. What are the kind of mitigation solutions I can have? So, for example, for that will be some kind of behavioral-based DDoS mitigation protections, signature-based. Signature-based basically means they're looking for specific patterns in the packet, in the request, and then categorize them as malicious traffic and block it. Challenge-based, which basically means I want to verify that you are a human being, you're not a bot, right? The server sends you a challenge to solve it to your browser, not to you as a human being. And you got those last resort solutions, which I don't like to use, such as geo-blocking, blacklist, threat limiting, all of this. This is only the last resort. Only if your website went down, you need to bring it back up, you can use it. Otherwise, try avoiding that kind of solutions. And obviously, you have some packet anomalies protection, stuff like that, and other types of solutions. But what's common to all of this, if it's not well configured, it won't last. Your services will remain down, and you need to know how to use it correctly. I want to share one more slide, but before that leads us to the next point I want to discuss, the new term of DDoS vulnerability, right? What is a DDoS vulnerability? So Chase, first of all, when you hear vulnerability, what's the first thing that you come up on your mind, right?
Yeah, this was a learning point for me when you reached out about this whole thing, because vulnerability, everybody thinks about applications. You think about bad code, you think about kind of the crappy programming that pushed an app out too fast or whatever else. Most people don't think about a DDoS vulnerability. I know that I wasn't, and this was something when you sent it over to me, I was like, that is brand new. I wasn't aware of it.
Right, but that's the reality these days. And DDoS vulnerability basically means a result of misconfiguration in your DDoS protection. And let me share a slide for that. When we talk about DDoS vulnerability, we're talking about a combination of a specific attack vector, in this example in the slide, DNS request flood type of attack, and the target can be an IP or FQDN address, and a destination port can be a specific application port or just a random port. And if your mitigation solution is not able to block it, it basically means you are vulnerable to this type of attack on this server. And this is something you need to solve immediately. And this actually brings me to the next slide. So Misconfiguration in DDoS mitigation brings you DDoS vulnerability, which eventually leads to a damaging downtime. Now, the only way that you can have damaging downtime is if you have a misconfiguration in your DDoS mitigation. So there is a solution. You need to fix those. The next topic I would like to talk about, some research that we made. What we see is that although DDoS mitigation have some vulnerabilities or we see that 3% of attacks that we work with, and I would say important DDoS mitigation vendors in the market, 63% of the simulations that we are testing, we find them to be automatically protected, which leaves us with 37% vulnerable that needs to be fixed, right? So at the end of the day, an organization buys a very expensive, I would say, DDoS mitigation solution, but it gets only around 60% automatically. And we know those services are very expensive. The cost starts from $200K and can reach $3 million easily. Depends on the size of organization you have, the amount of IPs, et cetera. And you think to yourself, listen, I'm buying so much expensive solution. I want to get the benefit. I want to have it 100% ready. So there is a solution. You can always test it and make sure it's fixed. Any insight from your side about this topic, Chase?
Yeah, what's interesting to me is just looking at the sort of research side here about 100,000 hours of annual DDoS testing. And those providers that are on there, those are all your upstream providers. Like that is the folks that are way up in the food chain that you typically sit back and think, okay, cool. Amazon's there, Cloudflare's there, Akamai is there, Arbor's there. Those are the folks that we've basically entrusted to be the holders of the dam for the longest amount of time. And it's not that they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. I think when Katrina happened here in the US, we saw exactly what happens when you have a misconfiguration in a protect surface where everybody thought that the levees were good because they'd been there for a long, long time. No one ever thought about a Category 5 hurricane coming in and dumping water north of New Orleans, and all that water came through. And then you had the levees fail, and they failed in series. And then you have the whole issue that we had where the entire city of New Orleans flooded. So all it takes for a cascading failure, because we talk about that all the time, is a misconfiguration, one thing being off, and it just follows along. Your bigger providers, the fact that you've got stats there that say 37% have got a manual intervention issue, that means that there is something in that chain that is wrong. And when things happen, which they typically do over time, you're going to have a cascading failure. I think it's great to know that there's a kind of a 63, 65-ish% of turn it on, you've got some protection. That's what you expect. But the real issue is the valves on the dam that have to be turned when there's too much water. Those require someone to actually go in there and make sure that the valves are set correctly.
Adjustment. And it's possible. I mean, that's something that you can easily do. You just need to put some effort on that and bring the right solutions, the right people to work on it and fix it. Good. So as I showed you last time, I prepared a nice diagram for you. I know you like it.
I love reference architectures, can't beat those.
Yeah. So let's talk a bit about DDoS mitigation best practices, right? And what technologies we have today, and how can we build a nice diagram that shows a typical environment of enterprise organization, how can we protect it, and what are the challenges that we have, right? So let's say I have an environment with 4 types of servers, like I got the API web here, I got the DNS server, email server, VoIP server. Typically, I'll have a load balancer before that, splitting the traffic, and I have some WAF protection for the API and web server, right? Because the WAF can't protect the other servers, only the API and web. And what protect the WAF and protects the other servers? We got some IPS, and then we got the firewall, right? Those are, I would say, the regular mitigation or protection that we know in the IT world. And then eventually you want to protect the firewall from DDoS attacks, right? You remember we talked, a firewall is not a good choice for protecting your organization from DDoS attacks. I'm still amazed by people telling me that over and over again, firewall was not designed to block DDoS. I see you have something to say about that.
Yeah, firewalls, I honestly were never designed to be a security solution. They were designed to kind of put up a border and then move packets from one place to the next. So it's problematic that people think firewalls are a security solution. It's really problematic that they think the firewall is going to stand up to a DDoS attack when the attack itself is designed to use packets and the network to overfill that particular approach. It just isn't a very smart way to approach the problem.
Exactly. And if you get hit by a DDoS in your firewall and your firewall gets its resources up, it basically means your entire organization went down. So avoid by any cost, don't use your firewall as a DDoS protection. Protect it from DDoS attacks by on-premise DDoS mitigation device. And then we have the edge router in this organization. And eventually we have those cloud-based DDoS mitigation solutions such as Scrub and Center, right? And then if you have a good setup, or if you think about, I want to push as much as I can mitigation outside of my network to my cloud, what I will do, I will set up some kind of telemetry protocol between my on-premise DDoS mitigation device to my scrubbing center, right? And then if I have some FQDN addresses that I want to provide them some WAF capability mitigations outside in the cloud, I will have some CDN types of DDoS mitigation, right? So in that case, I will make sure my environment, my setup is at some point well configured to be protected. So I got both layer 7 and layer 3 and 4 types of DDoS attack protection in the cloud by my CDN and my scrubbing center. And then if something goes in, I'll still have my on-premise DDoS mitigation device over here. And eventually I will have the WAF against the more sophisticated bot attacks or even my IPS, right? So let's say I have attackers want to attack my FQDNs, right? They will go to the CDN, but let's say my CDN is not able to block them. What happens? My scrubbing center for sure will not block them because those are kind of sophisticated attacks. They will get through to the network. If we have a good CPE mitigation device, it will block it. If not, they will go through to the WAF, right? But let's say that my CDN does block this attack, and I have a persistent attacker that understands I have a CDN solution. They want to bypass it, right? So what they will do, they will go online, they will do some search in engines like Shodan, Senses, whatever they can, or even go to the registry themselves, and they will find my IP, and then they will start to attack my scrubbing center with layer 7 attacks. And my scrubbing center was not designed to block layer 7 attacks. So what will happen, they will eventually come into the network, get to the WAF. My WAF is the last point of protection against the layer 7 DDoS attack aimed to my web servers. So this is kind of, I would say, a nice distribution of what we can do with the current technologies. And if we are going to adjust the CDN mitigations correctly and the scrubbing center mitigation correctly, what eventually happens is that we will get a good mitigation, best mitigation. Now, I can share like a tip from my side, best practice. If you do have a CDN mitigation over here and a scrubbing center, what you want to do is to set up kind of rules on the scrubbing center telling I don't allow any incoming traffic which was not originated from my CDN provider, right? That way you can make sure that all the attacks reaching into the scrubbing center are being blocked unless they've been authenticated by the CDN. Anything from your side on this slide on best practices?
Yeah, the best practice really is to have that type of approach to the problem available, because you're looking at it from an architectural standpoint, right? Routers are not meant to do anything other than move traffic from one spot to another. They don't care necessarily how big the traffic is. They just take stuff and put it where it's supposed to go. Firewalls, we already talked about that. IPS doesn't do anything for DDoS. It's just IPS is taking care of intrusion prevention, right? Not DOS. Right. Load balancer. How do you balance a load when the load is too big for the load to be balanced? That's literally the definition of a problem. And then a WAF, if that's your last line of defense, it's only going to take care of what it needs to take care of on that other side. But the one that sticks out to me too is your DNS typically does not sit where it should in that architecture behind a WAF and other things.
Right.
People don't put WAFs in front of DNS systems. Your DNS goes down, the network goes down anyway. So there's cascading failure here. And if you're not able to deal with this dynamically, then you're not going to be able to keep up. This architecture, if it looks like this, is built for cascading failure.
Right. So you don't protect the DNS, the email, the VoIP by the WAF. The WAF is designed only for the API in the web, right? Those servers are being protected by the IPS, the firewall. And yeah, if those attacks, let's say DNS water drop attacks or DNS, I don't know, recursive attacks are not being blocked by the on-premise DDoS mitigation device or by your mitigation solutions over here, you're going to get in pain, right? You need to have your response team ready. And when you need, if you depend on a response team, it means you're already suffering. So I would say the main challenge in the DDoS problem that we see today is that you need to always test your DDoS mitigation solutions in order to find out those holes, those we saw, right? And the problem with doing that, as a red team tester in the past, I'm sure you can agree, the problem in doing that, doing some red team DDoS testing, is that red team DDoS testing can cause damage in downtime, can cause you disruption, right? So this is why organizations are actually, when they do red team DDoS testing, they limit it in time. Usually that will be like a session of 2 to 3 hours, usually on weekends, night, once or twice a year, maybe 4 times a year, not more than that, just to make sure they can handle, they can respond to an attack. But the problem, because it's limited in time, you don't have enough time to test all of your online assets. You don't have time to verify all types of DDoS attacks, right? So basically, it leaves you with very small sample of what you can do. And that red team testing is good for human response procedural behaving, right? You want to see how your teams are organized, how they work together, how is your ISP communicate with your team, and if you have enough, if team have enough visibility into your network. So the main challenge is that, and today it's possible to use a different solution of non-disrupting DDoS testing, right? This is what we do here, and find all these gaps and basically fix those. Chase, any words about future trends in DDoS attacks?
I think we're going to see more of this, especially we've started to see in cyber is interesting because you could plot all this stuff out on a map and see how this goes over time. And what you find out is what was old becomes new again. It just cycles back. Like it's almost like fashion, right? Like we used to wear bell bottoms were ugly, and then people start wearing them again and whatever. I really hope like jean codes never come back, but that's another story. So where we're at now is that this stuff is becoming commoditized again. It's becoming an easy avenue because everybody's been focused on ransomware. They've been ignoring the issue around DDoS and those types of things for a whole lot of reasons, including what's going on globally and geopolitically. You're going to see more of this stuff starting to trickle its way into, I think personally, it's going to be more along the lines of small and mid-sized enterprises. I think lots of critical infrastructure that's run locally is going to be a really valid target. And that's more concerning just because of the fact that if I'm here at my house and we lose electricity, it's a problem. If I'm here in my county and we lose electricity, it's a really, really big problem. And that's what is actually taking place. You know, you're starting to see water systems, dams, like all of those, and they're not going after, you don't go after the whole grid at once. You go after one dam and one critical infrastructure component. And you've already seen it. So that to me is what stands out, is that what was old becomes new again. And what was old that is now new becomes kind of an innovative attack vector. And you don't want to be the recipient of an innovative attack.
Right. So I see that those attacking groups that we see all the communication in Telegram's channels, they publish it. They now have a very sophisticated systems of their own. Godzilla Skynet infrastructure and for shutdown. They're using those infrastructure as a DDoS for a higher service. Like they actually pay us $500 per hour, and you can use.
Yeah, what's your target? We'll take them down.
Yeah, and you see they're able to bring them down, right? And we saw at the beginning of the war with Russia and Ukraine, we thought the Killnet and non-M57 group, they're actually paying people to use their infrastructure, use the home resources of your computer. Give it to us for one day, you get $500. That's amazing, $1,000. They pay you money for free, basically. Just be part of our network, right?
Yeah, it's a
Don't do
good
it,
business
just
model.
and I think we'll see that for sure in the near future, being even more strong and more, I would say, robust. And I think that we'll also see some AI capabilities getting into DDoS attack. We already see those, especially in the layer 7 type of attack. API services are becoming more and more popular targets, not only for hacking, but also for DDoS, because those attacking groups understand that if your API service of the bank or the financial organization went down, you're in trouble. I remember I went a year ago, I was called to join to assist to some financial organization, big financial organization here with DDoS. So I came to the organization and I see all this team together working and trying to understand what's going on. And I'm asking them, okay, show me the servers that are down. And they have a lot of speculations. Maybe they hit us with this attack, maybe they hit us with this attack. And we go to these servers and we see a simple HTTP GET flood that was able to bring down, I think, I don't know, dozens of servers. And I asked them, listen, you have WAF, you have DDoS mitigation, so you have multiple DDoS mitigation equipment. Why are you not using that correctly? Because we are afraid, we are not sure how it will work, we're afraid they will cause us downtime. And now we sat together for a few hours, we configured everything, and boom, everything goes correctly. Website went up. So it's all a matter of how you use your configuration. Even if you get attacked by a very sophisticated attack, there are a lot of solutions for that, such as bot challenges, HTTP challenges, stuff like that. So I do expect our future will seem like a very sophisticated attack going to hit us with waves. We actually see it right now. I can tell you there are solutions, you just need to use them correctly. So this is my insight.
Yeah. Configure it correctly, you're in a better place, if nothing else. And then a lot of this DDoS attacks they're kind of a sledgehammer attack, and it's defensible. It's not going to be some super crazy APT level embedded executable, whatever else. It's going to be a whole lot of traffic coming at you. Did you port it right, and were you able to respond?
Right. Good. Howard, any topic you want to cover in this session or any questions?
No, let's see if anybody would like to submit any questions on the Q&A. There is a Q&A button here on the bottom of the webinar. If anyone would like to submit any questions, you can do so now. Let's give everyone a couple of minutes. I have a question. We spoke a little bit around regulation. There's some major regulation in Europe that's going to be going live, becoming law in the next 6 months. Chase, what's your view in terms of some of the SEC rulings on risk management? Is that something that you're seeing organizations getting stressed about, or is it just another law? What's your take on this topic?
Oh, they're getting very interested in it. I've probably had 2 or 3 calls with people in the last 10 days on the whole 8K stuff, the SEC, how to deal with it, what do they have to report, all those things. So it's good, in my opinion, at the market level, at the industry level, because we have to make this stuff more impactful. You know, all the other things we had in the past, people would just go, it's the cost of doing business, and they stroke a check and go on about their day, and nothing really changes. Whereas in the US, the moment you get the SEC or the IRS involved, all of a sudden people that need to pay attention do. No board member wants to talk to the SEC, especially not for an investigation. So I think it's going to drive a lot of change. But the reality of it is, too, we're in a space where it's pretty binary, carrot or stick. If you want to do things quicker, better, faster, business, do better, serve your customers better, carrot, right? Set up your defenses correctly and be ready. Or stick, ignore it and hope it doesn't happen to you, and then the SEC will be the stick.
And I think
Sorry,
also
go ahead,
insurance companies understand right now that if you get hit by a major DDoS attack, at some level they will tell you, we are going to exclude that from the insurance we gave to your company, right? I remember back in the day, I think it was a year or 2 years ago, Lloyd's of London excludes state-backed attacks from cyber insurance policies, right? I see you're smiling, Chase. Yeah, so people start to understand this is a real issue. They don't want to pay compensation to organization because the organization was not putting enough budget to secure themselves against simple attacks. It makes sense, right? You need to have yourself protected the right way. And I think the major lesson that always I'm amazed to see, I talked about it before in the webinar, but I'm stressing it again. Security-wise, products such as firewalls, PS, they will not that. People need to take that in mind and stop using those for DDoS. You need to protect those solutions from DDoS, not use them for DDoS. Every time I hear a CISO or manager of security talks about, yeah, I have a strong firewall. No, don't use your firewall against DDoS. This is the major lesson to take out.
So why is that?
Because the firewall was not designed to block DDoS. It's a stateful device by design, which basically means it can very quickly get overwhelmed by attacks and get all of its resources used. And if your firewall gets high loaded and gets stuck, all of your organization will go down. So you want to protect your firewall from DDoS. You want your firewall, as Chase stated earlier, to just manage who goes where and who have permissions to go where, and that's it. You don't want more than that.
Okay, great. Another question came in. So the question is saying DDoS attacks seem to be becoming more sophisticated. Do you think AI will play a role? And here I guess we're talking about on the attacker side, but maybe we can also address the defender side.
Yeah, for sure. In
You
my
guys know more about
opinion,
that one than I do.
so for my opinion, yeah, we already see DDoS mitigation companies are trying to involve AI capabilities inside their code and solutions. So it's like a game of mouse and a cat who will be faster. Yeah, Chase, what are your insights for that?
There's a little bit of a twist that I think is interesting to me. Even if you take away the AI, like applied AI side of it, the fact that we have so many new services coming online that are being used to do things with those AI enabled systems, all those are potential traffic generators. All those are potential misconfigurations. All of those sit in data centers. If you remember back to Mirai and some of the other sort of large volumetric attacks that occurred in the past,
Right.
they were just devices and applications and data center things that were misconfigured that were used. The speed and scale of which we're running forward on this AI thing means we're opening up additional avenues for traffic generation, which eventually works its way into DDoS type of attacks.
Yeah, what I afraid of is that attackers, especially with AI, can easily understand who is your DDoS mitigation vendor, even if it's a CDN or a BGP or a scrubbing center. And then once they're able to understand who is your mitigation service vendor, they can try to understand with their testing and experience which attack those DDoS mitigation vendors usually are vulnerable to. And that is where AI sophistication come into the picture, and we need to watch for that. And the only solution for that is to close those vulnerabilities as soon as possible. I promise you, this mitigation vendor that will put extra effort in closing those vulnerabilities as soon as possible and make itself completely automatically protected, get a lot of business in this market.
Just one final question, Chase. Maybe this is a trick question and it's for Alon, but let's ask anyway. So what's your opinion, Alon, in what if you don't do continuous testing and check for the configurations? Is there an effective way to protect against DDoS attacks?
I tell you what, I remember I was meeting with a bunch of CISOs, I think it was in Chicago 2 years ago, and they told me, listen, we feel like hostages in the hands of the DDoS mitigation vendors. We pay a lot of money and we don't know if we will be protected or not. Yes, we pay a lot of money and we pray that we won't find our names in the newspaper on tomorrow morning when the DDoS attack hit and brings us down. Yes, there is always what to do, but if you're not testing your DDoS solution all the time, you simply don't know if you're automatically protected or not. So you must test it. That's the only way, no other way, in my opinion.
Yeah, and since you mentioned, I just added a link on the chat for everybody to try out. So we have an online tool which within your organization, obviously, you can check out your DDoS threat rating. It takes about 5 minutes to do, so it's well worth it. We are pretty much out of time. We really appreciate the discussion between the two of you. Chase, thank you for joining us. We enjoyed having you, and thank you for your insight. And obviously, Alon, thank you for being such a gracious host and sharing your thoughts. Just final comments for those joining us today. We will be making this available on demand. We'll probably be posting some shorts as well in YouTube. Please look out for us. And thank you very much, Chase and Alon. Thank you, and have a great day.
Thank you, Howard. Awesome. Chase, big respect. Happy to see you again.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Goodbye for now.